where history's shadows cast long, unsettling doubts, the truth lies buried. From cryptic wartime codes to assassinations that scarred generations, unearth the secrets the world tried to forget. Hosts Tim Gardner and Eli Frame guide you through a labyrinth of unanswered questions, where every clue pulses with danger and intrigue, and perhaps an opinion or two. It's not all facts because history never is. Welcome to the Ciphered Past.
To a new episode of Ciphered Past, episode 50. I am your host, Tim Gardner. Alongside with me, as always, is my man with the master plan, Mr. Eli Frame. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can't believe there's number 50.
Yeah, crazy. Just within about a short 8 months, we've been able to really accomplish a lot, and so we're really grateful to our audience. We have a special guest on tonight to honor the 50th episode because it is a milestone for us, and we're really very fortunate to have him on. He's a co-author of JFK Chokeholds, a well-respected researcher. Professor Paul Bleau is with us tonight. Paul, thank you so much for being on with us for our 50th episode. Sorry.
Hey, well, thanks for having me, and congratulations for your 50th. I've been on twice so far, I think, and been great shows. And it seems that your followers are increasing. And keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So when we last left you and Jim, we had over almost a 2.5 hour show, which I thought was incredible. There's a lot to digest since our last episode. We had an interview with David Josephs talking about Mexico City. We had an interview with Jefferson Morley and about his thoughts on Mexico City and all sorts of stuff. But I want to, if you are privy to anything that we've been doing lately, I just wanted to get your response on like what you've been able to see. If you saw anything about the Grodin film or the Grodin take with the Wiegman thing, all that stuff kind of jumbled up. I know it's a jumbled question, but I'd love to hear your take on what you've been able to see from this.
Well, listen, I've been following. I can't say that lately I've been so involved in my own research that I've been less attentive to a lot of the go-to shows that interest me. And but I've heard from my good friends Mark and Andrew, who you had recently on your show, and you seem to be getting the right guests and covering the right topics and asking the right questions. Just the names you've brought up there, kudos, because I know that Mark and Andrew are among the top experts with respect to the JFK Records Act, and the research they're doing is fantastic. I may be joining them at NARA in the next few weeks. Nice. I'm looking into it, not for sure, but trying to work that out. And I'm super interested by the area of research. There's a strong likelihood that they're going to get hands on files that haven't seen the light of day, is what my feeling is. And then, of course, Jefferson, well, you've got your link to what's happening around Luna and all that stuff. So, you had Jim on, and it's just fantastic, So, I line up the guests, and I will get by. I always eventually, you see, we're about to produce, I'm going to talk to your audience today about a piece of work I'm doing with Dave Boylan and Jeff Meek. Okay, and Dave Boylan is one of the best file researchers you'll find. And he and Bill Simpich is extremely strong. Jeff Meek is one of the great interviewers of our day. I mean, he's done it more for writing articles. So he's interviewed people like Ruth Payne, Judge Griffith, if you can imagine. And he has a style about him that when you talk to him at first, he'll just say, hey, listen, I can ask you questions. And if you don't feel comfortable, it's up to you, don't ask. But look, in no time, people are confiding to him. They're confiding in him so many things, and so he helped on this research project that we'll talk about by doing some of the professional interviews that we did on the work we're looking into. And Dave did an awful lot of the. I'm going to show you what we have in here and what your audience, because to me, like we were talking about the Zapruder film, fixed, not fixed, such a photo, and things like that. I've been getting away from Daily Plaza more and more and focusing on who did it, how, why, when. Because for me, Dr. Zapruder film or not, shutting down witnesses. We know there was obstruction of justice for 60 years, and there still is some. So what we want to do, when we wrote the book Chokeholes, we came up with 10 massive arguments on why you can't conclude anything else but there having been a conspiracy. But when you flip the page on that, do you want to go back to that? Or do you want to say, okay, been there, done that? Or do you want to get into what is the conspiracy? And I hope to do a lot of that today with your audience. But yeah, keep up the great work. 50 shows. Are you doing a show a week or?
Usually about 2 a week.
2 a week, okay.
Yeah. So we're putting them out.
Wow.
And Eli, he's like me, we're both really busy with our jobs. So to fit them in, it's really impressive, because the fact is that we're very passionate about this project, and we just love doing it. And one of the things that I had a question about, and Eli, I'll let you cut in here in a second, was David Josephs laid out a really brilliant counter to the Jefferson Morley interview about Win Scott. So basically, Win Scott, his memoir convinced Jefferson Morley that Oswald was in Mexico. I'm not taking a shot at Mr. Morley. I think he's brilliant. My problem is that I don't think that the eyewitnesses on the bus actually really give a lot of credence to Oswald being in Mexico. So David broke that down perfectly. And if you watch our episode, which I hopefully soon you will, he went step by step. Eli, was that how many days was that he chronologically did on that?
I think he started at September 17th.
Yeah.
So it would have been call it 15 days or so. He started from the day of the visa application.
And so he went on forward explaining exactly who the witnesses were, these people, if they had credibility. Our whole show was just basically about that. And so I found it interesting. And so when I left that conversation, and I'm not speaking for Eli, but I was absolutely convinced he never stepped a foot in Mexico. Not one bit.
Yeah. He's written me, David, on that. You see, the key thing, like I spoke with John Newman. I talked to him at length and asked for his opinion on that. And he, his point is, people want to know whether he was impersonated or whether he was there. So John says, why can't it be both? So he says that to me. He could have been in Mexico City. But so what makes me lean in the direction that he probably wasn't there? I have a couple of things. Is there's been more and more shedding of light on the Sylvia audio incident, because the priest that she confided with was able to place the date based on an event, a show that Sylvia Audio went to say, and he says, we know that show took place on such a date, and it's a late date, so there's a problem there, in terms of but the key thing for me, right, is, and we go into that in Chocos, he was impersonated. So whether he was there or not, if you're impersonating a no-name, and you're trying to make him look guilty and in cahoots with the Castro regime, we know what the deal is, right? So the third thing, though, is I find pretty convincing is, and appears that this has definitely happened, is there was a debate, right, between David Atlee Phillips and Mark Lane in, I think, California. At the end of the debate, David Atlee Phillips said something along the lines that at the end of the day, we will probably find out that Oswald was never in Mexico City. I mean, that's from the horse's mouth. How can you say that? That means you didn't see any pictures, you had no tapes of him. Okay, that means that nobody reported seeing him, and for him to say that. Okay, and that seems to be well documented. Now, I don't know if the tape or apparently the counter to that is that, you sprung that on poor David Atlee Phillips at the last second and he felt pressure. I mean, if you're in the CIA, that kind of pressure, that's so that's absolutely crazy. But anyway, my take, and the only important thing that your audience has to know is what the hell is going on impersonating Oswald in Mexico City, and what about all these false witnesses like Alvarado and others that's saying, I saw him taking bribes in the Cuban embassy, and these stories end up being false, and all these liars, all these phony testimonies from what was her name, June Cobb and the Alvarado. And there's at least 3 or 4 characters that come in and spew out BS, and they're all David Atlee Phillips's people, and they're the ones making the false testimonies.
Right.
That's, to me, that is simply part of the strategy to say, okay, our future Patsy, how do we make him look like he's in cahoots with Oswald? We'll just bring an impersonator and come up with this story that can't even be verified, and say that he was in Mexico City accepting bribes, and then you get the black letters and all that stuff we've talked about before in the show. So that's the most important thing. Now, the debate as to whether he was there or not, the Mexicans, right, the Mexican government shared the photos and the tapes with the CIA. And I've read stuff along the lines that they simply couldn't find those photos. Okay, so they didn't appear. And the idea that the cameras were broken down, that doesn't work. There are too many cameras. They had individual people taking pictures. It wasn't only, it wasn't only pulse activated cameras. And I think what we're talking about, 5 cameras that missed the going in, the coming out, on what a total is it of 5 visits of Soviet and. I'm not buying it.
I agree. Yeah. I think, they haven't produced any credible evidence that he was there. So the point is, he was impersonated. David did a wonderful job in the episode that Tim referred to of using the source documentation to show that, everything the Warren Commission built their story on came from one source in the Mexican government, and or Hoover cobbling together bus routes that didn't make sense.
That I believe too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, right now I've seen no evidence that he was there.
You
He could have been, but they don't produce any evidence showing it.
you see, say he was there, okay? I think the most likely way of getting there is maybe the two people who were with him at Silviadio's drove down. Okay, say, and I'm not saying he was, but do you want that coming out? That he had people, Cubans that were driving.
Right.
That means collaborated. If you're going the lone nut route, the last thing you need is a chauffeur.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying is, okay, the bus doesn't work because they had to try and find, okay, well, what's a lone nuts method of travel to get there? Now, I that's why I'm still leaning towards he wasn't there, but to me, whether he was there or not is moot.
Yeah, I know it's a red flag from actually the real story. But I mean, David. One last thing, we'll close the topic on this here in just a second. But what I found interesting is that he gave more evidence about Oswald traveling north to Austin
Uh,
than Mexico City. Which, I mean, if you watch that episode, any of our viewers out there, that should have been the big exclamation point. That's
oh,
where Oswald went.
David Joseph does very good work.
He does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does very good work. He's a very smart individual, and to each his specialty. So he may be on a trail of stuff, sniffing out things that I simply am not on, So and that's all really important because the more you piece the timeline together, right, and you figure out, well, where was he and who was he with? I mean, look, Silviadio again. The key thing is, who are these two people with him? I mean, he's a lone nut. What's he doing with two Latino revolutionaries? So the whole lone nut thing, if that's not true, well, then the Warren Commission narrative isn't true. Just not a true narrative. So then people need to say, well, what's the alternative?
Yeah, I mean, to close this out, I agree with you. I think it's a major red flag when it comes. I mean, like you're basically, to talk about Mexico City and for him to go down to the Cuban embassy. And I never believed this in the first place that he wanted to go down there to get deported to Cuba or go to Cuba because they couldn't stand the United States. Which him and Marina, because that whole theology is just absolutely nuts to me. That they come in from the Soviet Union. There's no customs like questions about them coming in from the Soviet Union. They're here, and all of a sudden, like they want to leave the country again, like less than a year later, and go to Cuba. I mean, come on, what's the whole thing about that? So, I mean, again, it's with a lot of the things that we're told about this case that we're supposed to believe, but it's absolutely outrageous.
Well, the other key thing, right? This is important. The way he wanted to get into Cuba, right? Was by waiving the Fair Play for Cuba committee, work that he was doing, by saying that he was part of the Communist Party, okay, and the way he would go through Mexico to get his visas, right? Well, an informant did exactly that some 6 months earlier. And that informant was Thomas Vicente. Thomas Vicente worked out of the national headquarters of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and was an FBI informant. And the person who helped him with all the planning was William Harvey's assistant, a lady called Anita Pataki. Anita Pataki was close to June Cobb, who was in Mexico City, came up with all, and she was Fair Play for Cuba Committee. June Cobb was. Okay. Now, who did it before Thomas Vicente? The guy who went to Cuba before that and used somewhat the same strategy is Vincent T. Lee, who was the head of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, the national chair of the headline. So the travel route isn't a new one. It's one used by people who says, well, if you are Fair Play for Cuba committee, now, so if Oswald was on his way there, right? Now, let me get back to Anita Pataki. She helped a guy called Santiago Garriga, helped him set up a Fair Play for Cuba committee chapter in Miami. And Santiago Garriga was being pointed as a potential patsy. So who is this lady who works for Harvey, helping potential patsies or informants and Fair Play for Cuba committee link people, which Oswald was, right? What's going on there? So it's not as if this just arrived out of the blue. And then we have a guy called Policarpo Lopez. So he's the guy who goes to Fair Play for Cuba committee meetings in Tampa. The FBI has information that indicates that he may have been in on the plot with Oswald to kill Kennedy. What does he do 2 days after the assassination? He goes to Mexico City through Laredo and becomes, supposedly, the lone passenger on a plane from Mexico City to Cuba. More FPCC. So this FPCC patsy route or informant route. So you could easily tell a guy like Oswald, hey, you remember that mission you had in Mexico, not in Mexico, in Russia, where you did some spying for us, whatever, where he took pictures with his Minox camera. He probably didn't even know what he was doing. I think that Newman's right when he was sent there as a strategy to flush out a mole. So he didn't even have to know what was going on. There's indications that he was being used as a useful idiot, which is what now you say, hey, listen, we have a new mission for you in Mexico City. You're going to go and spy on us for over there, whatever. But really what they're doing is they're setting him up as a patsy, period. So let's go on the premise that he was driven there. There is something to be said, and this is where maybe David has more information. There is a gap with Oswald. We're not able to say, like people who say he wasn't there. Well, up to now, I haven't heard the argument of, well, where was he during those 5 or 6 days? Maybe there's something there that I just don't know. But if I'm trying to set him up, maybe I do want him in Mexico City just so he's out of view anywhere else, except it's still an informant, right? Not an informant, but an in-person making the calls, showing up at the embassies and all that stuff. So, but again, rather than getting into a long debate with anyone on whether he was there or not, I'm content with the position that he was impersonated and therefore being used, and therefore the people who organized the impersonation are likely part of the plot to kill Kennedy. That's the way I've broken it down.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Paul, and segues well into discussing the work that you mentioned at the very beginning that you've been doing with David and Jeff in terms of, trying to narrow down the plot. I'm sure we're going to see David Atlee Phillips on that list.
He's on my list. He's not on everybody, and he's on a lot of people's lists, but I'll talk to you about.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of touch points that we've just talked about, and I know we've talked about others in the prior episodes. So, he's got his fingers in a lot of these pots. So,
for sure.
You want to give us a glimpse into what you're
doing? I will do that. And look, just for your audience, it's funny when I give interviews on the radio locally here, people are fascinated. Whether you're in Europe, Quebec, you say the JFK assassination, they go bananas over that. They want to, and the only question, like you can go through all of chokeholds and say, well, this is a book about proving that there was a conspiracy. You're sure that within 5 minutes, say you have a 15-minute interview, within the end, they're going to say, okay, but who did it? So I just want to know who did it. And that's the question. And I found the answer to that question. I found the one that is safe. And I say, those that killed them were regime change specialists. And when you think of it that way, okay, and you think of this was a regime change. So the question you have to ask yourself, in that universe of people that change regimes, whether it's in Italy, whether it's in Chile, whether it's in Cuba, who does it? Who has the skills to do that? Because you don't just go and change a regime, right? There's a lot of black ops. There's a lot of techniques. We discussed some of them, like not anybody can just organize black letters, black letters that come from Cuba and go to media and make it look like there's, and they're using all sorts of information. They send it to Bobby Kennedy. They send some to little LBJ to make it look like a Cuban back plot using black letters. Now, black letters were developed in the CIA, but who? Right? You have to go into the black ops area. So the next thing I decided to do, I could say, well, you can answer that question on two other ways, right? Is where does the research community stand on those questions? Like, if I were to say, if you took all the David Josephs, the Bill Simpiches, the Larry Hancocks, the Andrew Eilers, and you took the top 130 researchers in the world, or 150, and you asked them, well, what do you think the motive was? Would we find commonalities? Would we find major differences? Where do we agree? Where do we disagree? And that's what we decided to do a year and a half ago. For the first time, large-scale surveys were done with the top researchers. We found them through their associations, email chains, and associations with conferences and groups. So we know who they are, right? Whether you agree with them or not. Who are the people that have read 30 books? Who are the people who've gone to 3 or 4 conferences? Who are the people that have read the results of the 6 investigations, the 6 government, and there's going to be a 7th one now with the Luna Commission? Who are they, right? So by doing that, right, and you select them and you get the right population answering those surveys that we did, and we didn't just do surveys, we set out 5 surveys. And if you can believe it, on average, we get about 120 responses. And I'm talking about, I can't say specific, but people of the ilk of the people I mentioned there, Jim DiEugenio, and we would send the results. If you go to chokeholes.com, it's a site run by Andrew Eiler, and the survey results are there, but I'm going to share some results today. And so the next step for me, and this is what we're going to publish very shortly, is what does the community think? Like, what does the research community, where do we stand on that? Now, my next step is, finding out what happened isn't a popularity contest, right? It's not a survey, but it still helps you answer questions by the press. If the press says, well, Paul Bleau thinks this, okay, but Paul Bleau could be wrong, or so and so. If you say that among the people who believe there's a conspiracy, 82% believe this, 48% believe that. That's a nice way of answering something, because you don't have to say why so and so thinks that or whatever. You're able to do that, and I think it's a useful step. Now, the next step that will be done, I am now in a think tank with 4 people, and I'll tell you, I've been talking with Bill Simpich, Doug Campbell, and Dave Boylan. And all we do is chat. We chat and say, okay, well, what happened? Who killed them? Okay, who do you think killed them? Who are the top four? Who are the people you would say you would say not only do you suspect it makes sense, but who are the ones where there's actual proof or documentary evidence or witness evidence? Like, I'll give you a name, Rip Robertson. Wonderful name. You want to look at someone who was trusted by the Cuban exiles, who didn't like Kennedy, who was in on every bloody covert action having to do with Castro. You have Rip Robertson. Do I have proof of someone saying, we haven't found proof or documentary evidence, say, oh, look, we can see that he was training, we can see this. There's a lot more of that when you get to people like Johnny Rosselli, William Harvey. There's a lot more documentary and a lot more corroborating evidence. Now, it doesn't tend to be smoking gun evidence, but it tends to be substantive enough when when you line up the ducks, you can say, okay, because you can find people have been found guilty on circumstantial evidence. I mean, if there's enough of it, right? If there's enough of it, it's not the best. You'd like to be able to say, hey, look, I've got DNA proof, or I've got fingerprints or whatever. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, share a document with you, and I'll show you some of the work we're doing. So the question is, who are the regime change specialists? What is that population? And you have to understand how the CIA is structured. Because in the CIA, you have intel collection, you have the Office of Security, you've got administrative services, but you've got covert operators. The regime change specialists are within the covert operators, but probably in the right hemisphere, not necessarily in the Far East. They're more likely, right, in the Western Hemisphere. And they're more likely involved with Cuban matters. That means jam wave, right? And then within the covert operators, you only have a very few who are specialized in executive action, right? Executive action is, we're going to take out Lumumba, we're going to take out Castro, we're going to take out, there aren't 1,000 people who do that. And these covert operators, right, they've done it before and they've done it after. So you find out who was involved in the murder of Letelier or Che Guevara or the coup in Chile or the coup or Watergate even. Okay, you look at the names that go through one, and that's what we mapped out on an Excel sheet. So we took these really bizarre events with covert activity in them, Vietnam, you name it, the removal of Lumumba, the murder of Hammerskog. Okay, you put them out and you start positioning people on the map. Where were they when these things happened? And a hell of a lot of them show up that are suspected to be involved in the Kennedy assassination. You see them again in Vietnam. You see them again all the way up to Iran-Contra. All the way, you look at the names in Iran-Contra, I'm going to show them to you. And you say, hey, wait a minute, wasn't he the guy who, was part of this Cuban revolutionary group? So then you take that large population and then you say, oh, it's not that large. It's not that large. Because you need to have a lot of knowledge and a lot of, excuse the term, balls to kill a president. Mm-hmm. You don't just hire Gino from Chicago who comes down and, that's not going to do it, right? You have to have people who don't like him. You have to have people who think it's patriotic to kill him. You have people who see, who know how to set up an opportunity and get away with it. Okay, so that's what we'll look at a bit today, and and look, I'm not at the point yet, but I think that within 6 months I'll be able to say, well, definitely him, maybe this person, most likely this person, possibly this one, but I hope that one of the things that the Luna Commission does is say, well, it's a cold case, reopen. We know she said that there's a conspiracy. She said that. We don't even have to report. So what do you do when there's a conspiracy? You say, okay, well, let's leave it unsolved. We've done our job. Let's go up to something else. No, she's got to do her. You have to follow up with something. So they're in a pickle.
Well, I'm not trying to push back against you right now on that. I wish I had the optimistic thinking that you have, Paul. But
I'm not saying she will.
No, yeah, but my analogy on this is like like what they said in Grumpy Old Man. You can crap in one hand and you can wish for the other and see what happens first. So, I mean, it's really that she's looking into MK Ultra right now, and
I know.
we have all these other things. I mean, and a friend and I were joking last night. We're talking about like who's she gonna look into next, and I said Diddy or whatever, right? So I'm not trying to make
other than exposing Dennis Hopper and Jack Nicholson, I'm not sure where she's going with it.
I know, right? But to get back to what you were just talking about, because I'm looking forward to seeing these names. But one name that I always get back to when it comes to linkage of history, right, is Theodore Shackley. I really hope you guys have looked into this guy because I think that he may be a guy that I would like to mention because he is.
Hey, you know what? Let's go off the beaten path here. I'm going to show you. I'll show you an Excel sheet here, okay? And we'll talk about Theodore Shackley, okay?
Sure.
So, for instance, okay, do you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, is it clear? Like, I mean, will it come out in the...
It's crystal clear. It looks great for the presentation.
Yep.
Okay, so what you have here, look at these names there. David Atlee Phillips. And you notice I just put my cursor over it. You see the picture of David Atlee Phillips?
Yep.
Okay, so you can hyperlink to David Atlee Phillips and find his profile on the Spartacus Educational, which isn't a full profile, but in our document we have a lot more other documents. So you can do that with Tracy Barnes. You can do it with Rip Robertson, right? So let's scroll down here. So in column A, you have the names of persons that are often mentioned by, okay, now don't, look, you see probability? That's a subjective probability. It's just but if you look at probability of involvement, okay, you see you have David Atlee Phillips. It's one person put it at 75%. One person put Sanchez. Look, David Morales. Boy, does the community ever think that he was involved? Okay, now William Harvey, 98%. Okay, then you have look, Ted Shackley person put 60%. Doesn't mean it's over or under. It may mean that they don't. But let's take a look at David Shackley along this line, right? Where can you find him? He was in the OSS during the war. He shows up at PB Success. PB Success is the overthrow in Guatemala, right? He's in Germany in 1954. That would be about the time that William Harvey was there building his tunnel. He was in Vietnam. He was in Laos in 1966. We're talking about covert activities. He got involved in Cuba, right? He got involved in AMWORLD. AMWORLD is important. And look, let's not stand there. He was involved in Chile with David Atlee Phillips, and he's involved in Iran-Contra. Oh, and probably Operation 40, which is an assassination group. So does he connect a lot of the dots? You were talking about Ted Shackley? Certainly he does, right? Now, if you take David Sanchez Morales, he was Army intelligence, okay? So was, by the way, Ted Shackley. He was Army intelligence. He wasn't tip OSS, but they were all linked. So you take David, okay? And I mean, look, he's everywhere too, right? And look, add to him the murder of Che Guevara, most likely involved in that, right? Chile, so Operation Condor. So you do that with these characters, and that's what we've done. So who are these people? Not all of them. Now, a guy like Carl Jenkins, he's a trainer of Cuban exiles. He showed them how to do triangulation of fire to remove Castro, right? Carl Jenkins, very interesting. So what does he do? He was involved with David Morales, most likely, in Vietnam. He also was in Laos with Ted Shackley. He's definitely linked to the murder. Well, definitely. I shouldn't say linked, definitely. But Lumumba. Okay, look, Ted Shackley, I forgot Lumumba, right? I mean, look, so is Jenkins involved in Iran-Contra? No, I don't have an involvement yet with him in Iran-Contra, right? Then, look, let's do it another way. Let's go down to Watergate.
I thought Jenkins was in Iran-Contra.
He may have been.
I thought that was, Dave Boylan wrote about it in the Wheaton Lead.
Oh, so you know what? Dave is in on this. He has his document. He's going to call me and tell me, Paul, he was involved. Thank you so much for putting that up. But you understand? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing at this point because this document. So you see when we say regime change specialists kill Kennedy, one way to close in on them is to look at these other places where a person was taken out. Letelier, Guevara, Lumumba. Okay? You can't give a mandate like that, like the focal point on that. I'm not saying who the hitman was. The hitman is unimportant. Who is the focal point? Who are the points, the people who are saying, okay, when, where, how, who are we going to bring in? How are we going to do it? Who are we going to frame for this, right? Are we going to use black letters? Are we going to have to buy a weapon like the Mannlicher Carcano and do all the paperwork to make it look like it's the Patsy's weapon? Because that, even Lansdale wrote about that. If we're going to get the murder weapon, don't worry about it. We'll handle the paperwork. That's what Lansdale says. I have a document by him that describes how you murder Castro. Oh, don't worry about the financial. We'll have also the financial paperwork on this. So you'll see a point in one direction. So in other words, take Harvey, not Harvey, but Oswald. We'll show that the Mannlicher Carcano was purchased by him from Chicago, from clients. We'll work there. Okay, we'll get something going. We're on it. Don't worry about the paperwork. That's what they do. Mm-hmm. So again, the more you know who handles these types of things, the more you can narrow down the group of suspects within a fairly small group. It's a fairly small group. Not everybody would do that. And the most likely focal point, like for Lumumba, you know who the focal point was. Bissell said it. He said our focal point was William Harvey. He was the focal point for the murder of the Castros. After, not at the very first, but he's the one who took over the relationship with Rosselli. So you know that Harvey, and he wrote ZR Rifle, okay, the executive action formula.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy has all the bona fides. Now in the Far East, you have a guy like Lansdale. Now he does come over to North America, gets involved in Mongoose and all that. So he may be involved, but in terms of, the whole relationship with the Cuban exiles and how the Cuban exiles get involved in making Oswald to be a patsy and all this, that's JM Wave stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's JM Wave stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's less connected with the Cuban exiles. Okay, so that is how I think you have to look at who are the suspects, right? Now, then you take that list and then you look at the prior plots, right? The prior plots to kill Kennedy, like the Pepe letters. Then you ask yourself, well, the whole ecosystem around the Pepe letters, it's fascinating. And it's William Harvey's ecosystem. And the whole ecosystem around the Pedro Charles letters a year later, that's David Atlee Phillips's ecosystem. But Harvey and Phillips worked hand in hand. They worked hand in hand. So, did they, like the big discussion that some are having is, was Phillips really involved, or did they take advantage of a spy he was running or a patsy he was running, a guy like, did they do an end run around him and then say, hey, look, the guy that is linked to you through Mexico City, that is linked to you through through the Morn Shield or whatever. Now we need you to do the propaganda to blame this on Castro. Did he see it coming or not? That's, some people are having that discussion. I am of the opinion that David Atlee Phillips was hands-on with people like William Harvey and David Morales. Okay, that's my opinion for all sorts of reasons. It has more to do with the speed things happened, from the get-go. But some people are telling me, Paul, you should see these files. You're going to see a very confused individual about Oswald in the paperwork. You'll see how confused and how panicked Phillips was. That's what they're telling me. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe I'll see stuff that will say, okay, I can show you that the paperwork, okay, I haven't seen it. That's so, you gotta keep an open mind until you see everything, because other than that, it's really just intelligent speculation. And when you get into these debates with these think tanks, you can't go into these things, these meetings saying, I'm right, I know I'm right. Because I'm hearing some very smart people bringing up names of other people. Like there's some names I've been introduced to there. Said, oh, among the Cuban exiles, these two people make sense. You know what I'm saying? And they're not even surveyed because that's how little known they are. So I wanted to show you that document in terms of getting away from proving or this or then asking the question, how can we figure out who did it? And the first thing you need to do is ask yourself the question, who had the skills to do it? Mm-hmm. And who had the opportunity, the motive? And you'll see there are not that many people who can be the focal point. Now, the other principle they had in these assassinations was to keep the team as small as possible. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And not to have, you wouldn't go through the normal channels there. It would be decision directly to focal point. So you're not going through Dulles to Bissell to, I don't know, J.C. King to Harvey to Morales. No. The guy who's going to run it, if it's Phillips, he gets the green light. Now, the other discussion that's worth having is, was this a rogue group, that worked under Harvey and did it on their own without a green light? Or did they have to have a green light? I'd be interested in hearing your opinions on that. Do you think they needed a green light from higher up,
Mm-hmm. I
or
do.
did it, could it be a band of specialists that do it on their own and they know people that it'll suit the purposes of everyone, and they do it based on what's
That's so my
what's
take. My take is, and thank you for asking that, Paul. So my take is that I feel like this thing was well coordinated, and you have to look at world, the not world, U.S. history when it comes to like you know how things have evolved over time. So you look at, I always go back to Alan Dulles and Richard Bissell and that firing that happened from Kennedy. Okay, and the track marks that happened forward from that, because again, we've read the brothers, we've read the Devil's Chessboard, and David Talbot has done a wonderful job by actually being very detailed and thorough about the personality of Alan Dulles. And Dulles goes all the way back, obviously, with the overthrow of the Fruit Group in South America. There's a lot of stuff with him, and just the way that he monopolizes things. And then he's known as like literally the grandfather of the CIA. He's the guy that everybody looks to for decisions. With all that being said, I think it's hard for me not to really like place this guy to be one of the decision makers of it. And you had that chart up there. I guarantee you that if you guys put Alan Dulles up there, he probably would have been involved with every one of them, 99%.
well,
So
well, certainly up till when he was fired, and maybe some
sure,
afterwards too, certainly,
sure.
because you know you're not going rogue on Dulles there. Like Dulles is in charge, or but McCone, it's another story. But Dulles, even when McCone was quote unquote in charge, uh, I think a lot of people still had their loyalties with Dulles. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, there could be a thing of like, you could be fired, but you're not fired, right? So
Oh yeah.
basically, I mean, he was still in Georgetown operating business. I mean, and he had, like you
Oh,
mentioned,
Talbot's work on his notes. It's unbelievable. The people he meets,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mhm.
describes the people he meets, like Paulino Sierra, a bloody go-getter for the mob, shows up at his place. And this guy, he did some work for the Rockefellers too, mind you, but his job was to find money to overtake Castro. And he meets, and then you have him meeting, what's the name of I'm trying to remember, who was the head of the Treasury in those days? It was,
Doug Dillon.
no, the head, ultimately he's the head of the Secret Service, right? I mean, Rowley was the head of the Secret Service,
Mm-hmm.
but they respond to Treasury, right?
Yeah, I thought C. Doug
Oh,
was.
no, you said Dillon.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. So he meets Dulles. And then in the meantime, you have Harvey meeting Claire Booth Luce,
Mm-hmm.
during the lead up. So what's going on there? Like that's Mockingbird.
Yeah.
That making sure there'll be weak security. Is that Secord and Dulles? I don't know,
Well,
but
my take is, like you go all the way back to Truman when he implemented this whole thing with the Central Intelligence Agency. I don't think that he actually had any idea that it would be a domestic terrorism, like, aspect of it, right? Um, that's how we've been able to look at, Operation Patriot, all this other stuff that we see nowadays about like surveillance when it comes to our computers and all this other stuff. This was generated by people want to put the blame towards Truman. I actually want to, I think Eisenhower really amplified that because he thought he was doing the right thing. Um, and I think that's the big issue. When you give that much autonomy to a group of people who feel like they are above, I mean, they that manifests in them thinking that they're above the president, right? And so I think, again, a guy like the grandfather, this is just my opinion. It's not your guys' opinion. It's my opinion. I think with an ego like that, in the way that he had operated, and especially with Richard Bissell, I think that with the loyalty that you just had mentioned moments ago, I think that this cascaded into I mean, look, there probably was other entities involved with this, but my thought process is I think that if you want to start looking at like who is really involved in arranging the coup, you have to look at Alan Dulles and I mean, that's just my opinion.
Okay, so what you're saying. Okay, let me try and conclude
Sure,
this,
sure.
and Eli pitch in too, like what your thoughts. So the focal point, the guy who manages the assassination and comes up with the strategy and everything, let's assume it's Harvey for now.
Sure.
He's not doing this without getting a wink or a message saying, "Hey, boys, there's a policy here. It's and we want to get rid of this guy for national security, right?" And those who will be involved, it's already been taken care of. You'll get away with it. Okay, you just make sure it's blamed on Castro or whatever. So there's some sort of, in other words, I'm not sure what the order is exactly, but what you're saying is Harvey doesn't do this on his own without. Now, my question is, does Dulles do this without himself having assurances?
I would say yes. I mean, again, I'm putting my tinfoil hat back on. There's the money people of this, of our nation I mean, there have been a lot of people that were really pissed off by the policies of Kennedy. They worked in straight conjunction with the CIA.
Yeah.
And so that's my thought process. I think that look, I'm not going to get into Israel. I did a side interview with Corey Hughes not too long ago.
No.
And he talks about Israel this, Israel that, nuclear weapons, all this other type of stuff, right?
Not back then for me. And
Yeah,
I'm not there.
no. But
Yeah.
but I'm saying like when it comes to like the big picture of all this, I mean, like yes, there had to have been like a conglomerate of people that really agreed upon this. But I think how this was absolutely staged is that I believe that the Central Intelligence Agency, and I get a lot of crap for this, but I believe that they were the ones that saw that Kennedy was actually going the opposite direction, and they saw that their power was going to be like literally dissolved if he had continued what he was doing. Okay, and so I mean, again, it's like Big Brother like losing all of his power. They weren't about to have that. They weren't about to have that. And I'm not saying the CIA is the overlord of the world. I'm not, because I don't know that. But after everything that I've read, the conversations that I've had with you, conversations that I've had with Eli, and our respected colleagues out there, by process of elimination, it just makes me believe that this is what went down. Eli, I want.
So Eli, why don't you give your? Did you think it could have been just a rogue group that decided on its own? Okay, the time.
No, I don't buy that it was a rogue group. I think that would be a fallback position that the CIA would take at like this day and age, right? They would say, "Oh, Joe Anides, yeah, he knew these Cubans who knew Oswald and blah blah blah." But in my opinion, these guys would not have, your Harveys and Moraleses would not have operated without a wink and a nod from above. You saw that with Harvey's testimony on ZR Rifle when he talks about Bissell, and Bissell winking and nodding that, yeah, he got it from the White House. These guys did not get fired, which we may expect, may not expect, but your spreadsheet shows they continued on in Vietnam, in Iran Contra. If these were rogue actors who took the initiative to go ahead and do this, and even the CIA then covered up for organizational safety, I don't believe they would have continued to put them in those positions moving forward of these regime change positions. They would say, okay, no, this guy went rogue,
No,
put him back in the back
I,
office.
I agree with you. Okay, because first of all, look, how could a rogue person rig the autopsy that evening? You know,
The autopsy is, yeah, that's the
key takeaway. How could a rogue person get all this press mockingbird, up and running, and getting all day one there within minutes? Hal Hendricks is already pointing the finger at Oswald and giving his profile. Okay?
Right.
So there's no way, in my opinion, that this is a rogue group. Now, as for, I'll give you a few insights on, like knowing who gave the green light. We're likely never going to find, a smoking gun there. There's more smoking guns on the focal point and what happens below, but what happens above, because there's nothing on paper, there's nothing, there's coded language used, and maybe it's just something one-on-one. They're really, really careful there, okay? But here are a few thoughts. Guatemala, what was it? It was policy being dictated by corporations. You mentioned United Fruit, right? It was a United Fruit war.
Yeah.
And who was their legal counsel? It was Sullivan Cromwell, right? Sullivan Cromwell is the Dulles brothers, right? So you have these organizations that don't necessarily do a lot of law, but they do a lot of policy, and they do a lot of lobbying, and some are really good at that. And if you look at the Dulleses and their wartime contracts, and Sullivan and Cromwell, and for how long they backed the Nazi regime, they wouldn't even give up those coins. That's in the devil's chessboard. That's the first thing. The second thing that you want to take note of, and this is John Newman who told me, he says the CIA rarely dictates policy, but can implement it. So in other words, he says, when you go into coups and regime change, it usually originates with the army. Now, the army being influenced by, economic policy and protecting markets and protecting supply chains. Okay, so you get that. Now, that bunch of people all would talk to one another in special group augmented. So special group augmented, right? When you're dictating the policies, these are more the policies of how do you get rid of Castro and Mongoose and all that. Who do you have at the table? Well, you have RFK, you've got McCone. Harvey's at the table of many of these meetings. He's not a member of the special group augmented, but he comes in the meetings as this CIA specialist who is going to take over things. You have Lansdale sort of doing the same thing. You have Fitzpatrick. You have all that gang, and you have the treasure. What's the guy's name? Boy, I'm trying to remember some of these characters' names. Anyway, you had the State Department. You had so you have all these groups that are involved in American security and national security policy, saying, what are we going to do with these pesky leaders? So the lines of communication are there. Now, obviously, you're not going to be in that special group having an open chat about the Kennedys. You just won't do it. But you see where the circle of power and influence is, right? You see who can influence. So then they decide to take out Guatemala. Who do they bring in to do the marketing? They bring in Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays, he's the one who convinced American women that smoking was their right. He's the guy who came in and said, when you have eggs in the morning, you really should have it with bacon, right? Or you should have orange juice in the morning. A glass of orange juice is, so he's the biggest influencer of his period. And he said, here's why the war or Guatemala is a good thing. So you have this Edward. So that's a club. That is a club of Like when you talk about the deep state, well, the deep state of that era is people of that ilk, and it's the captains of industry and all that. So Paul, but you're not. I agree. The only thing I'm trying to say is you have to have that kind of policy in green light, okay? And you have to have someone telling Johnson, look, you're about to be fired. You're going to lose your job. The Kennedys don't want you anymore. But look, they're not good for national security. So if something does come up, we need you to have our back. Oh, I'll have your back. I'll have your back. Whatever. So
Well, I mean, but do you think there's something to the Bobby Baker scandal that was really closely at that time of the assassination, right?
okay, I'm not involved in the Wallace's, but here's what I think is the Bobby Baker scandal and other stuff would have been used for the Kennedys to have their excuse to dump Johnson.
Exactly.
And there was the press that was about to do that. So
yeah,
and Johnson knew that this was coming. So I don't think Johnson's the architect or whatever.
No
way. There's no way you're going to get me in the LBJ and the oil gang. But he's a key guy to have on board after the fact, saying, "Hey,
yeah,
the next bullet's for you, my friend. If you don't, we're going to get you off the hook here. But what we need is this." Now, what they probably didn't expect is that LBJ would go the lone nut route. I think that totally screwed up the plans when LBJ and Hoover went the lone nut route, and then the CIA fought that for 2 or 3 weeks. They fought that for 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, of course. I mean, what are they going to do with this Zapruder film that clearly shows like a really weird? How are you going to argue? Okay, let's be vanilla about this. Okay, I mean, there's so much to talk about, but so if you're going to argue that a man that is in the book depository who could have literally shot the president when he was on before Elm, was that Houston? He could have shot him like at a better vantage point, right? He could have shot him at a better vantage point where he was there, right? So, but then he decides to make the turn and then leave. And those 3 shots, basically the throat shot, the whatever, the back shot, and then of course the head shot, you can make all. I mean, I went on a rant about Gerald Posner last night, and Lord forgive me, I apologize about that. I mean, the fact that people believe him in regards to just this madness is crazy. But anyways, my point is that
first of all, are you sure about your premise that people believe him? But go on.
Well, I think there's a group of people, I mean, especially.
No, there might be.
Yeah, I mean, there really is. And it's
I know some. So sorry. Yeah, he comes across as he's the
Fred Litwin,
especially for academia. Oh God, he is the poster boy for academia.
Yeah.
I have that. I did a survey, a research on that, and that's other than the Warren Commission. It's Posner, Shannon a bit, and McAdams somewhat,
and Litwin as well. Litwin's one of
those.
Oh
well, he wasn't mentioned back then, but yeah.
But
go on.
But my point is that basically, okay, so like again with the 3 shots, the 3 of us know this. I mean, like the way that everything had happened, and we seen the JFK film back and to the left, right? And from that vantage point, there's been people that said, well, it's possible that it can make it happen, but the problem is that you have to deal with nerves, you have to deal with precision, right? And if it was Oswald, he wasn't known as the best shot. So basically, you're dealing with all those flaws with Oswald, right?
And but I mean, like, rifle.
Yeah, and a really shitty rifle. Pardon my language, Paul. But you're dealing with like literally like all these flaws, but yet we're supposed to be we're supposed to be like, okay, yeah, we believe you on that. And that's why my grandfather told me a long time ago, don't believe what you read in the history books.
No, the history books. First of all, I questioned the authors of many of them, and they didn't even know the HSCA, most of them existed. They didn't. I say, well, what do you base it on? Oh, the Warren Commission. I said, well, were you aware that there were a total of 6 government investigations? What? They didn't know.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, the CIA had the trade book writers. In other words, those who wrote in trade magazines for history book writers. One of them is Max Holland. Max Holland would say, hey, this is the way you should go about writing the history of the JFK assassination. And look, anyway, I could get into that, but that was my first article ever written for Jim DiEugenio. It was on how history books cover the JFK assassination.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And I wasn't just reading what they wrote. I interacted with the authors. And I asked them why, and they answered. Oh, that's based on. I say, but how do you react to the HSCA saying there was a probable conspiracy? And we're talking about an investigation that's many years later that lasted a lot longer. And they impeached the Warren Commission. They said the Warren Commission didn't do a good job. Where is the American Historical Association on that? You're not following your own policies. But anyway, however, getting back, I think the key point I want to make here is I agree that there had to be a green light. Exactly how that was done will be very difficult to know. You can only speculate. But I thought maybe it would be interesting to share a few highlights of the research we did and see what the research community thinks. So why don't we do that right now? And I'm going to share a few things. So copy of research, share. So do you guys see this?
Yep, I can see it.
Yeah. Okay, so look, let's get right into it. By the way, this is a draft. Okay, so obviously it's going to be a little bit sexier. We're going to choose the right title, but this is what we want to say about the research project. It's about motive. It's about modus operandi. It's about timeline, and it's about persons of interest. It is not about the Zapruder film. It's not about Prayer Man. It's not about any of this. We're not proving there's a conspiracy. The people who helped us are those who accept that there's a conspiracy, and we want to know the nature of it, right? And look, here you can see the type of research that we did, right? We did 5 major surveys from, that included a population of very knowledgeable research community members. And again, on average, we get about 125 answers per survey. That is tremendous. We had a wonderful participation. We conducted 10 professional interviews or more, actually, on the same topics. So, when you do a survey, we can't get into why do you think so-and-so is a person of interest as much, right? We can't. It's hard to do that. But when we do the 10 professional interviews, we talk to people like Larry Hancock, Jim DiEugenio, David Kaiser, I'm trying to think of some others, Jefferson Morley, Johnny Cairns, other great researchers, right? And we asked them, well, what do you think the motive was? And we'd often say, well, here's a survey result. What do you think of the result? And it was wonderful discussions. And we kept that information verbatim, and you can find it in the document we're going to produce. Then we said, well, why not go back to the past too and look at what did Dan Hardway say throughout the years? We haven't interviewed him, but boy, does he have inside information. What did David Horn say? What did Gaetan Fonzi say? What did Jim Garrison say? What did Richard Schweiker say? So you're going to find an awful lot, and not, again, their opinions on what happened, not their opinions about Mexico City. It's more their opinions on, they may mention Mexico City, but they're going to say, well, this points to a stratagem, right? Then what we did is, you saw some of it, right? We did analysis of regime change operations conducted by the USA between World War II and all the way up to Iran-Contra. And we wanted to see how they were done, who was involved, and what can that maybe tell us about the JFK assassination. We actually did something, and this I have to give a lot of credit to Dave Boylan. I did some, but he did most of the work. Is he reproduced the CIA 1963 org charts. And when I say org charts, is there are many ways you can break down the beast, right? You can do it in terms of geographical area. So those would be the hemispheres. You can do it in terms of functions. You can take JM Wave and break it down. You can take the special group augmented. And, so he did an amazing job to say, well, if we say, for instance, Rip Robertson was involved, who did he actually answer to in the CIA at the time? I think that's hugely important, because that's where you can see where there are covert operations, like the really violent people, but you can also see the support staff in there. And that's an impressive. I might show you a quick peek at one of these, and that's still a work in progress. So this is the table of contents. So why don't I give you a few highlights? Let's go right away to some surveys. Okay, so when you will, okay. What's this one? Okay, so this first survey we did, guys, we did 5 surveys. The first one, the topic was motive, right? And look, we sent it to 430 people. We got 146 responses. Now, look at this here. I didn't show it to you, but look, on average, we'd ask one question per survey, and you can see it in here. How many books have you read on average about the JFK assassination? You can see the average is well over 30 books. We asked, how many conferences have you attended? And look, many have attended more than 3 or 4 conferences. Then we asked them, well, which of the following investigation reports have you read? Look, a lot of them have read the entirety of the Warren Commission, the HSCA, the Church Committee, you name it. And all sorts of things like that. So these are people that read, that network, that go to conferences. It's a knowledgeable bunch, right? Now, so here, look, we asked the question, which of the choices stands out as the top motive for assassinating JFK, right? We put the clampdown on the mafia. That's purple. There's not much in the purple right there. His diplomatic overtures to Castro. Well, let me see. It's a bit difficult right here in this one, in this size, to make out which color, but I think it's the small sliver there, right under the 18.7%. Now, look, let's go to the biggest one, 35.4%. That would be, he was a threat to U.S. national security. Okay, he was seen as a threat to national security. And look, there are an awful lot of things that dovetail with that, right? For instance, when you say he did not want to engage in Vietnam, you've got 11.1%. Well, that kind of dovetails with national security, right? 18.7% is a pretty big one. His foreign policies, well, yeah, that could be very similar too. But you can see that national security, when someone is seen as a national security problem, right? Then you can become patriotic, right? You can say, I did this for the good old USA. Now, this is a different question. Okay, so out of the groups that had a motive, right? Which group that was motivated to assassinate JFK was the most significant for ensuring that the plot would go into effect? So go to the 30.3%. It's marked rogue CIA agents. That is sort of maybe a bad question on our part. It doesn't mean they don't think the CIA as a group was involved. They're saying it's the rogue agents that were most important. Now, yeah, that probably means that, okay, people did it on their own. I know you, me, and Eli don't necessarily agree with that, right? Then you have rogue CIA officers. Okay, that's also added to agents, right? Then you have 23.4%. That's the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Okay, so look, 90% of the respondents felt that the plotters saw themselves as patriotic in killing JFK. At the same time, 75% felt they were self-serving. So it's a bit contradictory, but they still say, well, I won't lose my job or whatever. I don't like the guy. However, they did see themselves as patriotic. So look, those are key results in the... Now let's look at timeline. That's the second survey that goes up. So I'll ask you, when did the decision come down? Okay, the policy was made that JFK had to go. Was it when he was inaugurated? Was it after the failed Bay of Pigs? Was it after the missile crisis?
So I would say April.
April what, though?
April of 1963. I think that's when the CIA would have first found out about the overtures to Castro, right? I mean, I think you might have reached a tipping point after the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Interesting.
But April, a lot of things kind of come together in that, spring. We'll call it spring of 63.
Okay.
So I disagree. I respect you, Eli. You are one of the smartest people I know. But I would say it was in '62, after the firing of Dulles. I know I'm giving a lot of credence to that, but I think that's where the thing started going in motion. Look, I'm not saying that he is the lord of all this, but I think that, again, when you have they're part of this shadow government, right? I mean, Schlesinger, he said it himself, there is a shadow government, there is a deep state within a state. And I think that that layer of state that we're looking at right there had to involve Dulles and several other people. Dulles was looked at as a leader. You have to look at his actions prior to that. And again, I know I'm very heavy when it comes to David Talbot's work, but I think he's onto something 100% there. So you don't overthrow a country in South America, in Guatemala, if you don't have enough means and capability. I mean, I think this guy actually, he knew what he was doing. So, but Eli, no, I could see what you're saying. I think with the firing in '62 of Bissell and those guys, I think that's where it really started. But it took a long time to actually manifest this. They had to pick out literally the patsies and they had to pick out the detail for this. I mean, think about this. Can you yes, you can assassinate a president within 7 months of that timeline, but I think methodically they had to really think this thing out. And I think in '62, I think that's when it started.
So here's what I'll say. Okay, is first of all the respondents. It's funny because we mentioned a whole bunch of events, right? And during this event, that event, but because some events overlap, actually. His handling of the missile crisis, right? That's 18 in and around that time. The objectives of smoothing relations with Cuba and Russia, that actually began during the missile crisis through the diplomacy, right? The decision not to engage in Vietnam overlaps somewhat in time. Okay, so you have 62%, if you look at all that, of the people that put it somewhere between October 1962 and end of December 1962. Now I'll add this, is when did the Pepe letters start popping up? They
End of
popped
62, right? November 62.
November 62. That's when the Pepe letters started making threats. I think, now look, I think that it was accumulation of things. I think the Bay of Pigs really exacerbated some of the stakeholders, like the CIA there. You look at what E. Howard Hunt and Phillips say after the failed Bay of Pigs, and David Morales and the Cuban exiles, they're furious, you know. Now, does that coalesce into a decision? I think it marches its way up to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then there's a really good article in the Atlantic that describes how during the missile crisis, the hawks in JFK, they're openly insulting him in meetings. I mean, not to JFK's face, but amongst themselves. So I look, put it this way, our answer, if you look at this, is no later than the end of the missile crisis. So that's a year before the assassination. Did it arrive before that even? Maybe. But we, you know, if you're not in the meetings, right, you can't know for sure. However, it gives you an idea of what, and again, this is what the community thinks, right? Now, well, let me go to the next one, okay? This is really important because it tells you, look, you consider a lot of questions, right? Well, you can't go through them all. You see this question, how much of the following have you read, right? The Warren Commission, some, hell of a lot of them read some, right? A lot and a number read all. So we do that for all. That shows how knowledgeable these people are. Okay. Now, this gets into modus operandi. Oswald's Fair Play for Cuba Committee related activities in New Orleans during the summer of 62. They were based on his ideology. True or false? Almost everybody says false. They were manipulation tactics to set him up as a pro-Castro patsy. Almost everybody agrees with that. Crazy.
Wouldn't that, Paul, wouldn't that correlate with his radio interview when he basically like admitted that what you just said, basically that he, you know, wasn't a communist? He said,
Well, he said that he was in Russia with the support, not the support of the U.S. government. He said he was there, and there's a Freudian slip there. Look, was part of his role as a paid informant. Look at how many, right? Over 75. I mean, that's crazy there, right? Those of alone, not okay. Zero, not one person. There's a little sliver there, I think, or not. I don't know. Who cares? Were those of a true Marxist. So, you know, okay. So, hey, well, look, why don't we look at this? What do people think about Oswald going to Mexico City, right? So one is Oswald did go to Mexico City and was not impersonated. Two is he did go to Mexico City and was impersonated. Okay, he did go, but was impersonated also. Did not go to Mexico City and was impersonated. That would be David Josephs. Two would be John Newman. Okay. So, look, question one. nobody, I mean, just about nobody believes that he was not impersonated. Everybody believes he was impersonated, right? Now, he did go to Mexico City and was impersonated. So look, that's close, right? There's a lot. Look, compare the blue there with the blue in the other chart. It's close, right? Did not go to Mexico City. More people think that is true than those who think he did go to Mexico City, but all of them think he was impersonated, right? Not
Mhm.
right. Okay. Interesting results there. Okay, an Oswald impersonator was photographed and recorded in Mexico City. Let's go to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh yeah, boy, do people think that's true. I mean, yeah, so again, what does the community think, right? It doesn't mean they're right, but
Mhm.
okay. Section 6, we can go, I want to, oh yeah, okay. Here's interesting. This is interesting. We're going to get into tactics and strategies. I mean, we go into foreign assassins were recruited and all this, but look. Oh, I saw it earlier. Oh. Strategies and tactics. Let me see. Okay. How many? Subject to FPCC. Huh. Well, look, I'll go on memory on this one. Okay, so we ask. Oh, that's weird. Okay, it's not there. Cindy Godley. Okay, we'll get into persons of interest later. So listen. Okay, the question. Don't look at this chart. The question was, what strategy was most used? Okay, and for some reason I don't have the chart in front of me. And researchers point to ZR rifle. Others say Northwoods. Others say the regime tactics of that era were used. What they're saying is the murderer was killed by regime change specialists. When you say that, that's what it means. So whoever mastered ZR rifle, whoever mastered Operation Northwoods, whoever mastered regime change techniques, the black ops that are used, they're the people who killed Kennedy. That comes out clearly in the survey. Sorry, I can't find the right chart. Now, here's, guys, where it gets interesting. So on a scale of 1 to 5, and this we do it with a whole bunch of people, right? Please rate the following subjects with respect to the alleged conspiracy to JFK, to assassinate JFK, right? In other words, 1, no interest, 5, extreme interest, and the 6th one is they don't know, right? So Sidney Gottlieb, Dr. Death, right? He's got a 1 from some 35 respondents. Okay. No, that's not good. That means no interest. So he's not that well known, Sidney Gottlieb. Okay. Barnes. Now look at Morales. Look at the 5 there, right? So the research community has a lot of interest in Morales. They have a lot in Joanides because of all the publicity he's been getting. Then you get like Rip Robertson. He's an interesting guy, right? Like you go from, if you combine the 4s and the 5s, like we shouldn't be removing the 4s in here, right? The 4s is, if it's not extreme interest, it's high interest, right? So you take extreme and high, add the green and the purple, you've got a friggin' high result there. Now look, are there other people that get a ton of interest? David Atlee Phillips, all right? Ted Shackley. Now Ted Shackley, I would argue, isn't as well known as, like what we just showed about his involvement in covert activities from one to another is probably not that well known by the research community.
So I would like our audience to actually watch a Danny Jones interview with Danny Sheehan, which I think really sheds light to Theodore Shackley and his movements through time. I think it's very invaluable, and it will give you guys a lot of knowledge about how, post the Kennedy assassination, how he was really linked throughout history with the corrupt organizations that we see and the events. I'm sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, that's great. I agree with you.
I mean, I think Danny Sheehan is, for his theoretical view, I think he may be off when it comes to Trafficante a little bit, but I think he is absolutely brilliant when it comes to laying the layers about what Shackley was able to do. He's given classes, and I recommend to all you guys. I'll leave links. He has hours and hours of classes about his theology, which is absolutely brilliant about Shackley. Anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Look, just bring up interesting thing. We'll see how Trafficante is of interest a little later. But let's get back to Shackley. One of the people apparently that he wanted to deal with in Laos for the drug trade with the U.S., in other words, getting illicit drugs into different markets, was Trafficante. So there's a Shackley-Trafficante link. And who's Trafficante? Well, when he was in Cuba, right, before Castro took over, he was thrown in jail by Castro, but he was in charge of the heroin trade. So you can see how all these links are, that between the track, and then what's Iran-Contra, right? It's a drug deal gone wrong, right? And then you have Shackley involved there. So if you get into black money, then you get into people like Paul Helliwell. Paul Helliwell, he was the master of these, these banks that would deal with the transactions that were generated by the drug trade. Now let's keep going. Look at Harvey and Angleton are so friggin' high. Hunt a little less so, but he's still high. And there's Dulles. So Dulles, Bissell, Cabell, they're high, but Dulles is really high. Cord Mayer, he's the propaganda guy. Now here, we tried to measure people from the DPD and Captain William Westbrook. And there's rumors that he joined Morales in Vietnam later.
So Eli's going to give me shit about this, but Kenneth Croy is way too low. He's way too low.
You got to bump Kenneth Croy up there.
Yeah, you got to bump Kenneth Croy way up there because, I mean, how would you be next to Jack Ruby in the murder of Oswald? And also, this guy's a Forrest Gump, like I said with Matt about 20 episodes ago. He's the Forrest Gump of debauchery. That's what he is. He's everywhere. The guy is You
Yeah.
have to understand, like, this guy is like everywhere. He's
Well, look, if you total the green and the purple, he's not as high as Westbrook, but he's high, right? And I think what this means is sometimes, well, they haven't made up their mind, but it's still high. So if you look at the Dallas Police Department, boy, I mean, okay, people put Fritz, I think, a lot too high, in my opinion. But, so, like the problem is we couldn't get into why do you think he's high or not, or he shouldn't be there.
but I think you also have to look at Forrest Sorrells too. I'm looking at Forrest Sorrells has to be looked at too,
I
because
think so. Soros, but look then we get into the Secret Service, right?
yeah,
Floyd Boring, William Greer, the driver. Okay, but that's less known. Okay, and look, Soros, I would tell you that there are more people that find him very interesting to extreme interesting than not at all. So it's not because someone has a ton of publicity, right?
no, I get it. I mean,
Yeah,
my thing with
but
Sorrells, he arranged, again, allegedly, when it comes to like accounts, that he was the one that actually got the Zapruder film to be first watched by agents, right?
uh,
So they were able to confiscate the film. This is alleged, and so he's part of that, but also an alleged roll call in the textbook depository. So either that movie Parkland's full of shit, or like the recounts are full of shit about that as well. So, but I think Forrest Sorrells has a lot to do with the importance of this case, for sure.
yeah. So you see Trafficante, there's some interest there, and it's
Yeah,
Trafficante, Giancana, and Marcello, it's almost, but look, Rosselli's big because he had a lot of interaction with William Harvey.
yeah.
Okay, so uh, I won't go through everyone there, but
It's
you have
just
some of
fascinating.
the Guy Bannister, David Ferry. Uh, it's funny, I think they're persons of interest. They deserve to be persons of interest. That doesn't mean person of interest doesn't mean, well, we think that he was in on the assassination. It could mean he was in on using Oswald,
Mm-hmm.
or he deserves to be of interest because he interacted with Oswald so much. So, you can't just presume to read everything. But look, these people, what that did is it led us to go to look at Curtis LeMay. I mean, okay, so these would be the influencers, right? Lansdale, LeMay, right high. Yeah, look, this isn't a popularity contest. It's not something that you can take to the bank and say, therefore, he did it or whatever. But go back to what I was saying is how would the community, where do they, where do they coalesce on certain issues? And that's what's interesting with this. Do I agree with all these? No, I don't. But still, I find there's a lot of savvy there. And anyway, look, that, guys, is the survey part, right? Now, we have statements from investigation and organizational insiders. So look at what Gary Hart said. Who Oswald was, who did he know, what affiliation did he have with the Cuban network? Was his public identification with the left wing a cover for a connection with the anti-Castro right wing? I mean, that's a hell of a, okay. Oh, yeah, I mean, there's things here. Oh, Richard Schweiker, boy. Look at what he says. We do know Oswald had intelligence connections. Everywhere you look with him, there are fingerprints of intelligence. And then he says, it's more, let me go. Well, it was shocking. Tannenbaum. I went up there with Cliff Fenton, and Schweiker told me, in his opinion, the CIA was responsible for the assassination. That's a heck of a statement to come from a United States senator, and one who had even been Ronald Reagan's running mate in 1976. I mean, can you believe that? Let's go to some other incredible statements. Richard Sprague. So look, Richard Sprague, it's not nobody, right? He talks about the photographs. All right, and he talks about the problems with the Mexican embassy. So he was told by people who went down there what the problem was before Blakey took over, right? Then he says he speculates that he was a double agent. Dan Hardway. Dan told Jeff, I don't think there is any doubt that they, the agency, had an operational interest in Oswald. And look, Hardway also said that he was very interested in CIA officer William Harvey. Because Harvey and mobster John Rosselli were running Cuban exile hit teams onto the island, but he and Eddie Lopez were not allowed the security file on Oswald. Hardway sees Harvey as a suspect because of his position in the CIA, his hatred of the Kennedys, and his contacts with the mafia and the Cubans. If there was this conspiracy to kill Kennedy, and it did not involve Harvey, I would be most surprised. I mean, you know, it's someone like Hardway saying that should get, you know, that should get people's attention. That's history there. This is not, you know, a researcher that's trying to sell books or anything like that. This is an insider, right?
So Paul, let me ask you this. Okay, so with the how do I put this? So how they kind of disparaged Kennedy's reputation about him being like a adulterer, and you know they made it widely known about how much this guy was actually a piece of whatever. You know, you even get like reports that he had like diseases and all this other stuff because of his like run-ins with like multiple females. Do you think that was like dragged down from whatever agencies or entities that actually really helped plan this?
Oh, well, there's definitely a lot of BS there, like, what's her name there? Judith Campbell. I mean, her story, if you listen to her, it gets bigger every time. So she, you know, oh, let me sell version 1 of my book. It'll be like 2 meetings, and then 3 meetings, and then 8, and then, you know, like, you know, when you look at how big the thing gets with time, okay, she's embellishing. Well, I think he was a womanizer. Seymour Hersh did a hit job. There's an article at Kennedy's and King called "The Posthumous Assassination of JFK." I think that's the title of it. And when you know, when you say the victors write history, right? Okay, well, yeah, you will be more likely to leave the, I don't know, the perpetrators alone if you can be brought to think that Kennedy was a bad guy, you know, or he was evil or this or that. Was he a womanizer? I think he was. Now, the diseases, I don't know. I mean, you know, I just think that all these things after, like, that type of book sells, and that type of book, if you want to, you know, slam someone and lower his pedigree, some will give you a contract to do it.
But from like a intelligence perspective, or like for all of us to actually see from afar how this guy, like, I mean, we've heard multiple stories about like how he's on the Mediterranean with like a cohort on a boat, while Jackie was actually having a miscarriage and all this other like hyperbole bullshit that we hear. Um, you know, I think it's part of the structure about why, like, look, if this fell back about like how they were not able to actually really make this thing really succeed about the assassination, they can assassinate his character as well. Okay, I really believe that was a major factor on this, and I think it's really shameful because I mean, again, we're humans. All of us have really screwed up in our lives. Every one of us. I mean, nobody is perfect, but I mean, the way that they really kind of carved this thing out with him is that I mean, I've read a lot of this stuff, and it's just I feel like it really came out to be a justified thing where that they were trying to really discredit this guy.
Oh, they're hatchet jobs are all over the place.
Yeah, they did the same thing with MLK and with Malcolm X, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I
So
think that's their MO, right? I mean, you
they're
kill the
hatchet
guy and you make him look terrible, and
Yeah.
people. The theory is people would not shed as many tears. I mean, I sometimes I wonder if LBJ was the one who got assassinated instead of JFK, would we really care that much? It's like, does anybody really? I mean, well, I know people do like LBJ, but to me, he's like kind of a quintessential pig that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
You'd say, yeah, it's still unconstitutional, but he seemed like a piece of crap, anyways.
Oh, he seems like a bit of a psychopath. I mean,
Right.
I you know, but look, these powerful people, right, through their lifetimes, they have so many opportunities at a party or whatever to be who they want to be, and I don't know what kind of arrangement he had with Jackie, and what did she know she was getting into. Apparently, she knew he was a playboy, and all that. But the stories by Seymour Hersh, where he would have prostitutes coming into the White House, and they would, use the pool and the this and that. I don't buy it. I mean, look, you haven't proven it to me, and your sources are who? Secret Service people, like some people would despise Kennedy. Some of them are racist. Some of them, I don't buy it.
You mentioned one thing earlier in the episode, which I find absolutely fascinating, is that you said it took a couple of weeks for the CIA to absolutely digest um, that Johnson and Hoover were selling the public on the one shooter. I think that's a really an amazing
Yeah.
statement.
So the best source on that.
Hmm.
Sorry to cut you off. Breach of trust. He describes beautifully in his book. I mean, that's one of the best books, by the way, on the JFK assassination. And he describes all the goings on with the Warren Commission and how it was rigged and everything. But after the assassination, what you had is a combination of Win Scott and David Atlee Phillips putting pressure on the U.S. ambassador to Mexico, Thomas Mann. And Thomas Mann was saying, "Oh, we've got proof, and this and that." And Angleton is pushing it, right?
Yeah.
And Hoover, at one point, meets Hoover and Johnson 2 weeks into this, these false testimonies. They meet Mann and they meet Angleton, and they tell him, "Stop it. We're going the lone route. Okay, stop it." So Mann had to just zip his lips, and he because they were going on with the tapes and what happened in Mexico City. They were trying to build on these rumors that Oswald had received bribes, and Thomas Mann was the biggest. He was a war hawk, and so that was fascinating. So that came to a head.
Yeah, I mean, it makes those guys wouldn't have gone down without much of a fight if they've been fighting for 3-4 years to get war with Cuba, right? They didn't get it with the missile crisis. They had every pretext they needed. Now they've got the freaking communist Castro supporter killing the president. They can't get a war.
Whoa! Look, what keeps coming back in this whole thing is, remember Anderson and his articles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was feeding him the information? Like Anderson broke out the articles that Kennedy's assassination may have been blowback from the Americans trying to assassinate Castro. That was Anderson's big article, and it came out in the church committee and you name it. And more he was getting afraid. He had to write things. And the people that were twisting his arm were William Harvey and Johnny Rosselli.
Yeah. All right, guys. So one of the things I want to talk about before we close the show out, I'm trying to share this, is the Jesus, I always like screw these names up. The Alchins film. Forgive me, I apologize. So let's get into this, because I mean, like, for me, that's been the topic for debate. So we can see this from. Can you guys see my screen at all?
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, when you go on Google and you look at this particular photo, I'm not going to zoom into it particularly, but I think it's interesting because you see the book depository like literally in the background of this. My argument with Eli, I talked to him earlier about this off the air, and I said that basically this kind of helps refute the Zapruder film. If you look at it right there, they're really close to the book depository, in my opinion, with the people on those steps. Now, am I like missing out on this, or because again, this would actually make me believe that this is a true photo of like what's going on. You could see Conley on the side there. I should give a better representation if I had it zoomed in, but good Lord, I mean, like this photo really counters what the Zapruder film is.
You can probably zoom it, like if you.
Yeah, let me try. I apologize.
You just roll it with the. But what's interesting is there are people like they're looking. There's a shot that's been fired, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because the attention of the people, even though they're all hungover, a lot of them are hungover. This I'll tell you what really got my attention on and look, this is a key thing in don't lose the photo, because I think we talked about this on your show. Okay, so splatter analysis. Okay, where did they find splatter? Okay, so you see the motorcycles right there. The guy on the left, I think, is Bobby Hargis.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one, I forget his name, the one to the right. Okay. So Hargis gets hit so hard by splatter, he thinks he's been hit by a bullet. Okay, that first motorcyclist. There's splatter on the windshield of the limousine behind Kennedy. There's part of Kennedy's brain matter that ends up on the hood that Jackie Kennedy jumps out to go and pick up. The motorcyclist on the right gets splatter, but only on his left arm. Okay, only on his left arm. So what's happening is he's being shielded by Hargis, right? Hargis is shielding him, but so when you align, okay, the splatter, and you do an average alignment of the brain, the splatter on the window, the splatter on Hargis, you can make a direct line almost to the grassy knoll.
Yeah.
So the splatter analysis, and the guy who did that very well, it was Tink Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
I use his diagrams in our book Chokeholds.
Yeah.
So what is splatter doing and hitting a motorcyclist so hard that he thinks he's been hit by a bullet? How can that come from behind him?
So I have to make an argument about this, and so look at the road, okay?
Yeah.
Look at the road. So I don't have a close up photo, but I think this is really damning. Okay, so you have the people in the book depository. I'm starting to think this whole photo is absolutely accurate. Okay, you see the curb that's going off on. If you look at the photo itself, I don't have a zoom up, and I apologize, but look at the circle that goes back. Their turn, right, goes by the book depository, and if you look at the front car, you see Connolly there. He's clutching it. He's not clutching, but he's looking to the side, and you see JFK right there. Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm telling you, this Zapruder film is absolutely altered. It has to be. It really has to be because if you're going to explain to me that the Stemmons Freeway sign was basically like 20 feet away from the book depository, then I would say yeah, you have a point about that. But no, man. I mean, look at the Zapruder film and the space that it has, and if you look at it again, you can see he's like, I don't have a close up, and I apologize about this, but you do see basically Conley's turned to the side, and you have literally Kennedy like clutching himself right there behind him, like literally. I have to say this is some really groundbreaking stuff on this photo. Um, I know I'm an amateur at this, but I mean like you can look at the road. Look at the road. You could see the turn where they made that hard turn there, right by the book depository. And yeah, I think this is a really damning photo to really counter the Zapruder film.
I'm not a specialist on the Zapruder film, but what I'll say is that uh, I think shots came from many directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
there's a very good chance that one shot came from behind. Now you have the uh, what's the name of the building? The other shot that you think you see where the stairs are on the
The Daltex?
Daltex. I think there's a shot that came from Daltex.
Yeah.
I think there's one that came from because it wasn't it on the roof. Was it on the roof of the Records building or Daltex that they found a shell many years later?
No, I think it's the
That was
I think it's
the
the records building.
It's a Records building. Yeah?
yeah.
I mean, geez, you know.
So yeah, it's crazy, man. I mean,
Have you guys have you walked down Elm Street and oh
I
you
have not. It's
I went
I
I went
will
there.
soon, but I have not.
oh you no you know what best thing to do is actually go up in the Texas School Book Depository, take a look at it, go to the grassy knoll. If you go, I'll set you up with Matt Douthit. Matt Douthit is absolutely amazing on the Tippett assassination.
Mhm.
And he can give you a breakdown of step by step, second by second, well, second by second, step by step, minute by minute, Oswald's escape. So he can describe Daily Plaza for you. He can describe where Holland placed the shooters. I
Mhm.
was there, you know, when you're there and you go behind the fence and you see Holland's drawing and you're able to place the footsteps and well, you know, where he indicates it. And it's surprisingly how small it is. It's not that big, but look, when you're from the window, there's no way that a moving target like that you're going to get two hits that did the damage that Oswald did. There's just no way. Uh, you know, the interesting thing is to see the vistas. You can see Houston Street, right? You can see you won't see. Oh yeah, it would have been an easier shot had he been alone. No,
Yeah.
Right.
if you want to get him into triangulation. So doing that tour is, and then what Matt will do, if you guys go, I'll set you up with him. And he will then bring you to the Tippett assassination. He'll walk you from his rooming house, not walk you, we'll take a car, but he'll take you, then he'll take you to where Tippett was shot. Then he'll he may even walk you to the movie theater where he's arrested and show you where the shoe store was. Then Chico's. It's absolutely fascinating, and the best thing you do is you don't say a damn word. You just listen to him. He'll show you where he threw his coat or where his coat was found and this and that. He will tell you witness by witness what they said. Like the Tippett assassination is just as fascinating, and Oswald did not commit that assassination.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I agree.
we had Joe McBride on, and Joe, I think, is actually, other than Matt, probably the best person to really describe what happened in the aftermath. And Joe
Yeah.
really lays that out to a really optimal angle. And but anyways, so we're getting to the end stretch of our show. But for episode 50, this has been an absolutely achievement for us.
Been great.
I
I hope you enjoyed it because I'm telling you, there's start getting into who, when, why, and how. That's all it counts now.
mm-hmm.
If we take all the best brains in there and start getting away from there's enough proof that there was a conspiracy, right? Luna's going to say it again, and the HSCA said it, and so many insiders said it. So getting involved in the minutia around that, but then ask yourself, well, who could have done this?
Yeah.
And I didn't show the. Would it be worthwhile that I show you the org chart of the CIA?
Sure.
And where these people exist?
Yeah, please do. Before we
I'll
go
just
there.
do it real quickly, but this is going to be in the document, so it'd be worth. And I think this is worth its. Is worth the book in its entirety. We'll go down. We even did some AI saying, well, why is so and so considered a person of interest? And in some cases, they actually do a pretty good job. But let me get there. Look at these org charts. Okay, now that's just no name, just functions, right? Central Intelligence Agency.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get into, you've got science and technology. Okay. Now, here's where it gets interesting, right? Then look, right? You can take the Deputy Director of Plans. Was that Cabell or Bissell? I think it was the DDP.
Bissell.
Bissell, thank you. That's what I thought. But okay, so you got Western Hemisphere. That was king at the time. You had the Western Europe. So you have these structures, right? So you want to kill someone in Africa, you're going to go to the Africa division. You're going to say, well, okay, what embassies can I use? What facilities do I have over there? And then you're going to say, well, like when they killed Lumumba or wanted to kill Lumumba, have him killed, they said, oh, well, we need French-speaking Corsicans because he's in the Congo. They speak French there, and we can set something up in the Congo, right? So anyway, let's keep going. Now, this is, look, Special Affairs Staff, right? That's the group. Now, that before it was called Special Affairs Staff, it was Task Force W, headed by who? William Harvey, right? Now, William Harvey, therefore, if you go back a year, right? Now, you can hyperlink on Desmond Fitzgerald, Bruce Cheever, and get all sorts of documentation. But it tells you, okay, that, first of all, Harvey is managing JM Wave. Okay, Harvey is in charge of Ted Shackley at JM Wave, right? And we'll get into the JM Wave structure. But then when you get into special operations, do you see to the right here? Who are the names there? Okay. There's our friend Carl Jenkins, right? And then, okay, so you get into counterintelligence. You see the names Austin Horn here and Anna Pataki. Well, they answer Okay, they end up answering to Harvey, right, before Desmond Fitzgerald was there. So then you say, oh, well, Anna Pataki, she's the person who helped, what's his name, Thomas Vicente go to Cuba, right? And she works, and she helped Santiago Garriga set up his Fair Play for Cuba committee operation. And she is a key aide to William Harvey, right? Now, let's see how Paul Maggio, he was involved in the Pepe letters, okay? So seeing that Richard Tansing, so when you see this and you say, okay, such a name shows up on a file, okay, with a RIF number 104 something, you're able to take that person's name and say, well, okay, who is he to write such a thing or to be included? You go right here and you see, oh, that's why they included him. Mm-hmm. Now, look, Hotel Rivera Havana, okay, Mayor Lansky, but you know, principal investors, Santo Traficante. Oh, who's the head of security? Herminio Diaz. He's a bodyguard and a killer. And he's rumored to maybe want to be being one of the shooters. Can't know. And where's Louis McWillie? He's the pit boss, right? That's Jack Ruby's friend, right?
Yeah.
You have John Martino in there. He should be in there.
This is great. This is great stuff.
Look at here. This is J.M. Wave. Ted Shackley, Robert Moore, a name I never heard of, but Dave Boylan says, oh, you have to know that guy's name, right? So remember, you have Harvey to Shackley to Moore, and right here, David Morales.
Mm-hmm.
Big name, right? And then they're under David Morales. We have Rip Robertson, Grayson Lynch. I mean, it's amazing what the look. Then you can go into the Soviet Russia division. I mean,
wow,
this is counterintelligence. Now, I'll bring you to something that's pretty fascinating. Okay, so let me show you something here. You're going to like this, I think. When you go to the appendices, look at this now. Who answers to JM Wave? We're going to get there. Did I miss it? Like we give a breakdown in what the numbers mean, but let's keep going. Look at this here. So the Cuban exiles, they arrive in Miami, right? And they're organized in organizations that are sponsored by the CIA, right? So you have, for instance, the DRE, right? Well, you have the DRE here, but now, yeah, so if I go on the DRE, I can hyperlink to that. And that's, what's his name? Bringier, right? The guy who fought with Oswald. He was part of the DRE. So if I open this up, look at this. DRE, history, date. I have all the key members, right? Leading personalities. Luis Fernandez Rocha, Salvat, Guterres. Is Bringier's name in there? Because he was in New Orleans, but they were based in. Now you have Alpha 66. Look, Alpha 66. Okay, Alpha 66. Okay, that's what's his name? Vesiana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, you have Vesiana Blanche, right? Antonio Vesiana. You have, who was the guy who was arrested by the Cubans and he spoke to, his name's not there. But
Arrested by the Cubans?
oh, he was arrested by the Cubans, and he confessed. He said that a grenade exploded near him.
Oh, Tony Cuesta?
Yes, good show. So Cuesta has a grenade explode. He becomes blind, and while he's blind, he talks to Fabian Escalante, and he says, "Look, there's a guy in our group. This is in '66. Our group that died. He died, and his name is, remember that bodyguard? His name is Diaz, and Diaz told us that he was involved in the assassination. Now, whatever that's worth, but in terms of a map, right? So remember that all these groups, they're organized under JM Wave. JM Wave is they're overseeing these groups.
Wow.
And they're handing them money. And Joanides is handing money to the DRE.
That's crazy.
So that's the type of, I think, it's when you do that, right? When we do that, guys, that we start saying, okay, well, where are they? Who are they? Where do they fit? Where do they work? Who do they answer to?
Yep.
That's the work that, you have, when we're done, I'll get Dave Boylan and maybe a few others to join us on the show, and we'll discuss.
No, we'd love that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, Dave. Dave, you need someone out there ferreting through files. I've done a lot, but boy, it's impressive what they've done.
But your work is really groundbreaking, and that's why we really appreciate you, because, again, you've been really instrumental to what we do on this show. Again, we've had you on for 3 episodes, but every episode has really hit hard. Like, what your expertise to our audience really, again, you're blunt with your knowledge, but I think that our audience really absorbs that to a point where it helps them understand this whole case more. And so I think you deserve a lot of credit, Paul. You're incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, thank you. It's come up with years, but you have to jump. Like, as I say, I had to turn the page. I will never debate someone on whether there was a conspiracy. That's a waste of time for me.
Yeah.
That's the total waste of time. If you want to think the earth is flat or whatever, I'm not going to debate you. Why would I give you a podium? I'm not doing that.
Right.
What you do here is if you're serious, right? And look, crazy. Okay, do you think they're really searching the Epstein files? Wouldn't you be looking at, well, who went on that island? What did the chauffeurs see? What did the pilots see? What logbooks? Let's talk to the victims. There'd be a list. Okay, so this, and Gaetan Fonzi was looking at this stuff, right, with the very limited means that he had. But now we have this, and look, the only thing that I care about, like when we have our think tanks on this, is, okay, we're landed at a point where we were saying to ourselves, okay, how could it not be Harvey? You know what I mean? You can go by almost the other one. You can go by a negative template. You can go by process of elimination. So we were saying, well, could it have been Morales? No, you're not going to go too high to too low, because if you're too low, well, first of all, the guy at the high may not even know who Morales is. Everybody knows who Harvey is, right? And Morales won't do something if he doesn't know the right person and trust the right person, that if that guy is saying, yeah, it's policy, and yeah, they're going to have our back, and this is what we need to do, it can't be 5,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's down to like 3 or 4, like people of the ilk of David Atlee Phillips, William Harvey. Morales, I'm convinced, is involved, but he's not the focal point. He's probably training the killers. He's probably choosing the killers more than Harvey, and he may be doing it for one of the hit teams. He may be saying, I'll take care of hit team A. You know, there's going to be a hit team. And maybe QJ Win is lining up hit team 2. QJ Win being, you know, and so look, it's, you're almost, I mean, you can almost satisfy yourself that the assassination is solved to a large degree.
Yeah.
Like, most likely, you know that national security had something to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know that people are getting really pissed from the failed Bay pigs all the way up to the missile crisis, and things are just coming to a head. Okay, what date was it? I don't know, but you can see that it's accumulating, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know that they used black ops like black letters, like blaming a patsy, like falsifying documentation. You know that. You know that they went the ZR rifle route to a large degree. That you know, okay? And you kind of know, well, okay, who can do that within there? Well, you see it in the org charts. You see it in the documents that are going around, and you can see it by what the investigators like Hardway concluded.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're an investigator and you're talking to people and you're looking them in the eye and Phillips is lying to you, we don't get that benefit, right? They got it. And that's why I put a lot of faith in some of the insider investigators like Schweiker and Fonzie, and Fonzie's a big influence for me. Garrison too. Garrison was on to stuff. He just overmatched, you know, the poor guy. I don't think Clay Shaw was involved in planning an assassination. I think he was involved in running an informant in more David Ferry, but you know, Clay Shaw was clearly anti-communist, and he was in an organization in New Orleans, and part of the whole World Trade Center had to do with fighting communism. The one city in the States that was the most affected by Castro was New Orleans, and he wanted Castro out like many others. That doesn't mean he knew that Oswald would eventually be chosen in as a patsy. But was he using him as a useful idiot to hand out flyers and to see, you know, who would join up? And why else would Oswald call Warren DeVries of the FBI when he's arrested? You know, like that makes a lot of sense. Right? I'm Al Qaeda, and you know, I get arrested. Oh, let me call the FBI. You know, I want to have a chat.
Well, Paul, we're going to wrap the show up. We're going to go ahead and do our final takes. Usually we have our the hosts give our takes first. Our guest of honor is always last. I want to thank you so much, Paul, for being on episode 50 with us. I mean, like,
I love it.
This has
Thank
been
you. It's an honor.
You again are our guy, and we're so grateful that you joined us. I want to say, when it comes to theology, when it comes to the assassination, I think the big thing for me is recognize what is bullshit and what is not bullshit, right? So last night I went on a tirade with Fred Litwin and Gerald Posner. It wasn't a tirade per se. It was basically me being tired of like the spokespeople of the community, and the mainstream media actually getting these people that give us a vanilla aspect of it. I think it's absolutely tired. I think it's an insult to the JFK community. I think it's an insult to the public and everybody who seeks for the truth. So I think we need more Paul Bleaus out there versus Gerald Posners and Fred Litwins. And we need these type of people out there that can give us the truth. So that's my final take.
But they're going the way of the dodo bird, because look, when Luna, who's already said there's a conspiracy, okay, whose side is Paul Bleau on there? Like, am I a conspiracy nut, or hey, wait a minute, I've got some pretty powerful people.
No, you're
Schweiker, Horn, Hart. Who's off on a limb? You know, it's not. We're much closer to the official narrative, and especially with what Luna has already said.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're really trying to sell that, hey, you know what? I have no doubt that it was a lone nut. None. None.
Well,
I mean,
my
there's a
my,
difference
my
between saying, hey, you know what? I think there still could be a lone nut, I mean, but to completely be
but
disconnected and say there's no chance there's a conspiracy after all that, ignore it. That's all I do is ignore
yeah,
it because
exactly.
I don't. I'm so behind. I know that they'll throw insults and they've written about chokeholds, and I read their critique of chokeholds, and it's terrible. It's,
Hmm.
it's a terrible. They didn't read the book, but they have to do something. You
Well, I
know,
think my point to you, Paul, was that we need more critical thinkers out there because I mentioned last night in a post that um, I think critical thinkers are the lifeline of our society because the fact is that if we stick to the narrative and what we're presented to and we accept it, I think that's where we fail. Eli, what's your final take, and then we'll get Paul.
Yeah, it's I'm thankful to have Paul back on. It's always fun to hear him speak, and I'm excited to see what you and David and the other guys come out with here because this was a good teaser. A lot of work goes into those org charts and those names and the schematics you're putting together. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the whole thing comes together because it's right up my alley in terms of things I'm interested in, the ways I like to see information presented, and I'm not surprised after chokeholds because that was really you know up my alley in terms of felt like it was written for me, unlike a lot of the assassination books. So it was great.
well, guys, I think it's fun because it's fun to deal with people who are knowledgeable. And like if I forget a name and Eli, you say, "Oh, that's Cuesta," makes my life easier. So, or anyway, and bringing up subjects and that are worth thinking about. But if I had any suggestions for the research community and the audiences, you're going to get not that I'm necessarily a huge believer in the way some of the Luna stuff's being written up and all that. I can't focus on that. But look, the don't if you read a history book, right, that says, "Oh, the Warren Commission said there's a lone nut," please look at it. Look at your kid's history book and go and see the teacher
Yes.
and show them the results of the HSCA. Show them what Luna said. Show them that they're preaching, they're taking advantage of a captive audience of very young people
Hmm.
and brainwashing them and gaslighting them.
Yes.
So that's if you want to do something that's helpful, is you tell them that and then complain to the American Historical Association. Said I read that and it's not reflective of the historical facts and the historical trace because history is supposed to evolve with new information,
Mm-hmm.
and history in this case is in a quagmire of the Warren Commission. It stopped in 1964 and there's no more history. You don't want to touch it. Well, sorry, but real history is real history. So they that's what your audience can do is say, stop feeding my kid this
Hmm.
this tripe. I object to that. Okay, choose another textbook.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Textbook. Don't do that. Complain. Because if they're allowed to get away with it, nobody tells them. And often the teachers don't know. They just don't know. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, hey, look, I'll show you the conclusion of the HSCA, and I'll show you now the conclusion of the Warren Commission, the Luna, or what Luna said. Okay. Show them and say, I don't appreciate that you're just giving them the 1964 terrible version of a fairy tale.
Hmm.
Anyway, hey, thanks, guys. It was fun being on your show. And time really flies.
Yeah,
Like,
this has been a major pleasure. Thank you so much. And
Thank you,
and
Paul.
again, he's the co-author of JFK assassination chokeholds. I want to give a lot of credit to Mr. Paul Bleau, who is our guy. Episode 50 is a huge milestone for us, and who better to have than our favorite guest. And thank you again for being back on with us. We do appreciate it.
Fantastic, guys. Let's
Thank you, Paul.
onwards and upwards.
That's right.
Absolutely. And we're going to share all of his details on his book and, of course, his social media details on there. And like I say, every episode, the truth is out there. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you next episode. Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, Paul.